Wake up! Ahead of the reveal next week, starting on August 23rd, Bungie has put out a brand new article called Bring the Thunder Inside Arc 3.0. And in this article, we're learning a bunch of brand new information about the Arc 3.0 revamp that's going to be coming alongside Season 18. Of course, in this video, we're going to be going over absolutely everything, basically reading this thing from start to finish to cover all of the Arc 3.0 news many of you have been waiting for. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive on in. Here's what Bungie had to say about Arc 3.0. Like the inevitable lightning that follows storm clouds, Arc 3.0's time has finally arrived. In 2022, the original trio of elemental subclasses that power Guardians in Destiny 2 have been undergoing a major overhaul. Void was the first subclass to get the 3.0 treatment with the launch of the Witch Queen expansion. Season of the Haunted welcomed Solar 3.0, and soon, it will be time for Arc wielders to receive their upgrades. The Destiny 2 development team has been hard at work on the subclass revamp, making sure that the new version of the Arc subclass brings the thunder. Having led subclass redesigns with Void and Solar, the team has spent a great deal of time zeroing in on the essence of what a subclass revamp is all about, making sure that every aspect of gameplay and every ability and feature fits into the player fantasy. To get there, it all starts with inspiration. Because at its heart, Arc is really just go fast and hit stuff, said Destiny designer Sam Dunn when asked about the core fantasy that powered the Arc 3.0 revamp. We call it the whole W subclass. Everything is built around moving forward and enabling aggression and those abilities. Powering that high speed, high impact goal, one of the prime inspirations for Arc 3.0 was the 2009 action movie Crank 2: High Voltage. The madcap action flick stars Jason Statham as an ex-hitman who has his heart stolen and replaced with a battery. To stay alive, Statham must keep his body electrically charged in increasingly outrageous ways. It's non-stop, it's relentless, and it's a great place to start for the fantasy the team wanted to achieve, namely ridiculous closing speed and maximum impact upon arrival. And so that's the general theme that Bungie went with when it comes to Arc 3.0, enhanced movement getting you up and around faster and smacking things while you do. Now, before we dive into the class-specific Arc abilities, let's talk about the buffs and debuffs that are going to be key to the Arc 3.0 experience. First up is a new buff called Amplified, which is key to the Arc 3.0 experience. When amplified, your Guardian is faster, both in terms of movement speed and in terms of their weapon handling. Additionally, you're also more agile, able to perform long slides that can function as a devastating setup for some of the attacks that follow. Unlike other damage type buffs, Void's Invisibility or Solar's Radiant, players don't need to equip any specific aspects or fragments to become amplified. That's really interesting. By default, all Arc classes become amplified after rapidly defeating targets with any Arc damage, and equipped aspects and fragments offer additional ways to become or benefit from being amplified. That sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to tie it in with stuff like Risk Runner and the Trinity Ghoul. Again, as I always call it, the actual best weapon in the game. Let's move on. After sprinting for a few seconds, an amplified Guardian will gain another boost in speed, as designer Mike Humble put it, basically as fast as we can make our sprint animation go, gaining a sizable PvE damage resistance buff and enabling an even longer slide ability. Imagine full-on Metroid speed booster mode. Oh, Bungie, you're talking my language. Only Samus is now wielding a Gjallarhorn. Even if a player is no longer amplified, as long as they keep sprinting, the speed booster buff will stay active. Now, Bungie goes on to say that in development, Speed Booster probably took the longest for them to get on board with, in that you were already moving faster to begin with, said Humboldt. And when asked about the process of developing and refining the verbs for Arc 3.0, he said, adding PvE damage resistance to Speed Booster to cement it as a strong gap closing tool and seeing it being used more from one cover to the next in playtesting really brought it all together for me. You start sprinting and then you hear this audio swell that starts to come up and you're like a jet engine rocketing around the arena. It's awesome. On the debuff side, Arc 3.0 is bringing two to the party, Blind and Jolt. Blinded opponents in PvE won't be able to see, naturally, and will also be disoriented and unable to fire their weapon. That is huge. In PvP, blinded opponents will have their screen whited out and their HUD removed for a short period of time alongside a ringing audio effect simulating the ringing in the ears after a flashbang explodes. I was going to say it sounds like a stun or a flashbang grenade in COD. Jolted opponents who are damaged will periodically send slivers of chain lightning out to nearby enemies, damaging them in the process. So you're kind of like charging your enemies and causing them to periodically shock other enemies around them. Sort of similar to a constant, persistently damaging spread poison. Alright, after that, Arc 3.0 also democratizes ionic traces. I knew they were going to do that, which were previously available only to middle tree warlocks. Now available to all, traces are objects that when collected will add energy for all of your abilities. For people out there who primarily play Titans or Hunters, it's a very, very good way to kind of cycle through your abilities. Use your melee, get your grenade, use your grenade, get your melee. Ionic traces are fantastic, and they track to your position, so you don't have to go chasing them down when you spawn them. So, now that you're familiar with the basics, let's jump into the classes themselves to see how they'll be making the most of Arc 3.0. Starting with Hunters. For Hunters, the Arc Staff Super is returning. With Arc Staff, Hunters will be able to block and deflect projectiles with a press of a button, as well as perform an armored dodge where, upon dodging, the Hunter is more resistant to incoming damage. But one super didn't seem like enough for the team, and thus we have the introduction of a brand new Arc-themed super, the Gathering Storm. Here, the Hunter leaps into the air, hurling their staff into the ground or into an unlucky enemy like a spear. Upon impact, the staff emits a damaging burst that jolts nearby enemies. Soon after, a giant bolt of lightning strikes the staff and overcharges it, creating a large damage zone around it for several seconds. And while overcharged, the staff sends out arcs of lightning to damage any enemies that move near it. So almost kind of like a reverse well of radiance, where you're throwing down the spear and then rather than creating a protective area that's restoring health and giving overshields and boosts, it's just a big damaging field. I like the sound of that. Definitely interesting stuff. On the melee side, the team kept the Hunter's combination blow ability, feeling like it was right in line with the graceful warrior fantasy that they're going for Hunters. Kills with combination blow will refund dodge energy, increase melee damage, and restore a small amount of health, allowing skilled Hunters to chain their dodges and melee attacks into balletic bursts of beautiful fury. In addition, the disorienting blow melee returns, blinding opponents with a devastating palm attack while also now amplifying the Hunter along the way. Hunters will be able to choose from 3 arc aspects to customize their tactical style. The first is called Flow State, where defeating a jolted opponent causes you to become amplified. When amplified, the Hunter's dodge will recharge faster and make you more resistant to damage, and you'll have quicker reload times. Then we've got Tempest Strike, which allows the Hunter to perform a sliding melee that launches an arc wave along the ground, dealing significant damage and jolting enemies in its path. Finally, we've got Lethal Current. After dodging, the Hunter's melee lunge range is increased and their next melee attack jolts the target and creates a damaging lightning aftershock. When used with the Arc Staff Super, after dodging, the Hunter's next staff light attack is actually gonna hit twice. In addition, hitting a jolted enemy with a melee attack will bind them. Finally, and of particular note, Arc 3.0 will also bring back the Blink movement mode for Hunters. That's right, your days of subjugation are finally at an end. In fact, the Blink ability will also include a baseline buff for any class that has access to it, which means they're going to be buffing it for Warlocks as well. This is a major change because of course Blink hasn't been a part of the Hunter toolkit since Destiny 1, where it was by far the best PvP focused jump movement option in the game. So not only am I happy to see it coming back for Hunters, I'm happy to see that it's going to be getting a little bit of a buff here in D2, finally. But alright, let's move on to Warlocks. Bungie describes their player fantasy for Arc Warlocks as being akin to that of Emperor Palpatine, shooting full lightning fingers mode all across the battlefield. They state that they wanted the player to feel like they're channeling the power of the storm through their own bodies, controlling the storm and controlling lightning like an elemental conduit. And thankfully, a lot of that power fantasy has kind of already been met. So, 2 supers will be available for Warlocks. Chaos Reach, where players will be able to shoot concentrated beams of arc energy out of their hand to decimate opponents. Good, I'm glad they're not getting rid of Super Beam. And of course, Storm Trance, which is more akin to the image of Palpatine floating around the world firing electricity from their fingers. This super combines both the landfall behavior from the previous bottom tier arc tree, creating a damaging shockwave underneath the player upon supercast, and the ionic blink behavior from the old top tree arc, allowing the Warlock to teleport briefly during their super. And can I just stop right there and say that in and of itself is already a massive buff to Storm Trance. Being able to mix landfall with ionic blink, already super happy with that change. Additionally, Warlocks will have 2 melee abilities, both utilizing the power of lightning. The Ball Lightning melee will send out a floating ball of arc energy that detonates, zapping enemies down from above. Chain Lightning will send out arcs of lightning to strike and jolt the primary target and chain damage to surrounding enemies in the process. The Warlock's whole thing is that being amplified modifies their abilities. It powers them up. And for Ball Lightning, if you're amplified, the arc ball will fly out and zap enemies 3 times instead of just the normal 1 time, so that you can get more damage out of it. And if you're amplified while utilizing Chain Lightning, it'll chain that lightning to more targets. More specifically, while normal Chain Lightning creates a single set of chains that bounce between a set number of targets, when amplified, the ability creates 2 sets of chains and can potentially jump to twice the number of enemies. Interesting stuff there. Now, we're going to have 3 aspects available for Warlocks as well. The first one is one we all know and love, good old Arc Soul, our Arc Buddy. The Warlock casts a rift to create an Arc Soul that will assist the player in battle. Allies who pass through the rift will also earn an Arc Soul. The rift charges faster when allies are near, and while amplified, any Arc Soul you have or gain is going to be supercharged, increasing its fire rate. I like that on 2 different fronts. One, I love the whole amplified thing, being able to move around and then get a couple of buffs so long as you're moving. I'm a very kind of kinetic, frenetic sort of player. If you've ever watched my live streams, you see I'm never just sitting still. I like to run around and it gets me killed all the time. But I like movement. Movement feels good in Destiny, so I'm glad that people are being, that arc is being built up around the notion of basically building up a static charge like you're running around back and forth on a shag carpet. And I like that it's going to be giving buffs to specific abilities. I could see that being really interesting in trials and in PvP game modes, since you're going to be able to just drop that rift and get your Arc Soul buddy anyway, but if you want to get the supercharged one, you have to move around the map. This is going to be interesting stuff. I cannot wait to see how it plays. Anyways, the next aspect is titled Lightning Surge. The Warlock activates their melee while sliding to transform it into a ball of lightning and teleport forward, calling down a field of lightning bolts at the exit point that jolts targets. And then finally, Electrostatic Mind. Arc ability kills and kills on arc debuffed enemies create ionic traces. When you collect any ionic trace, you become amplified. So that's just another way to become amplified. Interesting stuff there. And I like that basically it's all the abilities we kind of currently have available on, Arc Warlocks, but it's now going to be a bit more democratized. You don't have to pick top tree, bottom tree, middle tree. You can kind of mix and match it now with aspects and fragments. Good stuff. All right. Moving on to our final class, of course, we've got Titans. Titans have traditionally been known as paragons of mobility, but with Arc 3.0, the team is shaking things up. They had a couple of inspirations in mind for the Titan Arc revamp, the lead with your fists, bare knuckle brawler, and the freight train. They go on to say that the desire to punch all the things manifests in a couple of devastating supers that are returning for Arc 3.0. Fist of Havoc and Thunder Crash. While the latter is practically unchanged from before, Fist of Havoc now has an adjusted slam radius that's halfway between top and bottom path, and the ground slam leaves a damaging field in its wake, while slamming from the air causes a damaging AoE effect from previous top tree behavior. In the case of Thunder Crash and some other abilities, uncoupling a subclass's abilities from the old subclass diamond system will result in some substantial buffs depending on how players use it. It's one of the intrinsic advantages that the new Subclass 3.0 system brings to Destiny. When you start pairing them with different things, even though nothing changed about the actual ability, they can end up getting significantly stronger as a result, because of course now they aren't locked into a canned set of perks that surround them, and Thunder Crash is going to be a great example of that. One of the biggest changes coming to the Arc Titan is the new Thruster class ability. By double tapping a button, the Titan bursts in their throttle direction at speed, performing a quick first-person evade comparable in distance to a hunter's dodge. Arc is the damage type that's about mobility, so if we're gonna add a mobility boost anywhere for Titans, it's gotta be there. Almost kinda like a pseudo dodge-focused shoulder charge. For melee attacks, Titans will retain the Seismic Strike shoulder charge, which blinds enemies. Performing a Seismic Strike while amplified will increase the radius of the blind, and the blinding effect will last longer. Ballistic Slam is also going to be returning, where players can slam the ground after sprinting in the air, creating a damaging explosion upon impact. But that's not all. Those returning melees will be joined by a brand new charged attack known as Thunderclap. All of my Incredible Hulk fans going absolutely mad right now. Here, the Titan player holds the melee button and charges up arc energy that can be unleashed in either a quick, powerful jab or held and built up to be unleashed in a furious one-punch man style blast that will devastate an opponent. The charge state cannot be stored and the Titan must be on the ground to charge the punch, but the damage is significant. A 90% charged Thunderclap will one-shot Guardians in PvP. But that reward will be balanced by the time it will take to build up that charge level and the fact that you must remain stationary to charge, always a dangerous move in PvP. And that I find really interesting, so basically you're going to have to sit back and power yourself up Dragon Ball Z style to unleash a single mighty punch. Going to be really fun to do some damage testing with that in PvE as well. But like other subclasses, Arc 3.0 Titans will have 3 aspects to select from. First up is Touch of Thunder, which improves arc grenades in the following ways. For flashbangs, it fires an additional blind impulse on its first bounce. For pulse grenades, when the grenade damages an enemy, it creates an ionic trace for the Titan. Pulse grenade damage will increase over time as the grenade lingers after impact. It's going to be really interesting to do some damage testing with that. For those who are our OG veterans of Destiny 2, you guys remember how strong pulse grenades were at game launch. Double grenades with armamentarium basically gave you a second super as your grenade. So it's going to be interesting to play around with that. Lightning grenades. This will grant them an additional charge for lightning grenade and jolts targets on initial blast. Then finally, for storm grenades, creates a roaming thundercloud that moves and tracks enemies, similar to the Stasis Hunter's Silence and Squall super, firing lightning bolts at the ground underneath it. After that, the next aspect we've got is Juggernaut. While sprinting and with full class energy, the Titan gains a frontal shield that blocks incoming damage. When amplified, the shield is stronger. Once the shield is depleted by taking damage, the player's class energy is depleted. Return of the Juggernaut ability. And finally, we've got Knockout. Melee kills trigger health regeneration and make the Titan amplified. Critically wounding an enemy or breaking their shield increases melee range and damage for a brief period. A Titan's base melee becomes arc empowered while Knockout is active. So basically an arc version, very similar to, I think it's the Soul Invictus perk on Solar Titans right now, where if you become empowered with Soul Invictus, all of your melees, even uncharged ones, are going to deal solar damage. So this is going to be something similar but with arc damage. Now, of course, to complement the class-specific aspects, Arc 3.0 will also introduce a suite of new fragments, which offer new perks to build upon as well as add bonuses or penalties to your Guardian's intrinsic stats. And here's a look at a few of the fragments that we'll be getting with Arc 3.0. First is Spark of Beacons. When the player is amplified, Arc special weapon kills will create a blinding explosion. Then we've got Spark of Resistance. When surrounded by enemies, the player has increased damage resistance. After that, Spark of Momentum. Sliding over ammo will reload your weapon and grant a small amount of melee energy. Sliding over heavy ammo increases the amount of energy granted. That could be really good. And finally, Spark of Shock. The player's arc grenades jolt enemies. But there we go. All in all, the changes that are coming with Arc 3.0 will give Guardians more ways to bring the pain to enemies of humanity, while also letting players customize their Guardians the way they want to play. Fans will have their first chance to see Arc 3.0 in action during next week's Destiny 2 showcase, which is coming on August 23rd, starting at 9 AM Pacific. Make sure you check out the showcase reveal page, which we've got linked down in the description box below. But there we go, Guardians. That is your sneak peek look at the incoming Arc 3.0. There is some really phenomenal stuff in here. I'm really happy with the way they're sort of molding Arc 3.0 to basically implement some of the best of Arc abilities that we've got right now for specific classes, while adding in some really interesting things to complement it. I think the entire Jolt and Amplified system are really interesting ways to make Arc feel unique, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it next week. But anyways, that's the news. Those are my thoughts. Be sure to leave me yours down in the comments section below. How do you feel about Arc 3.0? What are you excited about? What are you looking forward to? And what builds are you already theory crafting in your head? Be sure to let me know. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest stuff we're putting out. I'm out for now. Thanks so much for watching. As always, I am the Black Link. You Guardians, stay frosty.